So good afternoon, everyone. Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's panel on digital MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification, redefining the rules of the carbon market and creating scale. So I'd like to welcome all participants here today in person. I know it's one of the last sessions of a two-day event, so thank you for that. And also like to thank our online participants for being with us today. So good afternoon. And we're very happy to talk about and excited to talk about carbon markets, the future of carbon markets. And part of that future is digital monitoring, reporting, and verification. My name is Nadine Planzer. I am the Director of Business Development in Environmental Markets for SustainCERT. SustainCERT, for those of you who don't know, is an impact verification organization. And we're developing digital verification solutions to create, number one, credibility in the market, efficiencies in the process, and scalability. So to the extent of that, we have actually published a white paper in the summer, and I will discuss the blueprints of digital verification in a little bit more detail afterwards, and we'll have a deeper discussion with the panelists on it as well. And for the last 6 months, we've been actually talking to the market about digital MRV. What are the implications? What are the benefits? What are the changing rules in a digital context? So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our experienced panelists. So I'll start with you, Sandeep. Next to me is Sandeep Choudhury, and we're so happy he's here with us today because you lost your voice, and now his voice is back to speak about DMRV. He's a director of VNV Advisory. And to the left here, I have Anantha Karthik. He's running the carbon program of UpEnergy. And I have Daniel Lee, head of commercial at Climate Impact X, telling us about the downstream perspective. And we have Mustafa Ali Khan, head of carbon and climate strategy at Climate Connect Digital. So thank you very much for being with us today. So the session is going to be split into sort of 4 major areas. One, I'm going to talk about DMRV and the benefits. And we'll briefly talk about that. Then we'll dive into the blueprints of digital verification and get the perspectives of the panelists. And then we'll open up the floor to questions and answers. And please, whatever you feel, what's your burning question about DMRV, please just feel free to make any comments or ask questions. And then we'll end it with challenges moving forward. How do we really operationalize and implement DMRV in carbon markets? So, I will start with setting the scene. So what's the case for digital MRV? We really think DMRV, digitization, is really going to scale carbon markets. And so why do we think it's going to scale carbon markets? Well, I'm going to list a couple reasons here, and that'll kind of kickstart the conversation with the panelists. So we think that DMRV is going to create data quality increases. So we're going to increase the quality of monitoring reports and increase the quality of then verification. And so this will actually increase overall efficiencies in the verification process, which is needed. And overall, you're going to be able to detect, let's say, outliers and data inequalities or data quality issues earlier in the process. So project developers are going to be able to respond quicker by adapting and looking at how we can resolve some issues. And the main sort of, let's say, one of the main goals of DMRV really is near real-time issuance of credits. So at SustainCERT, we really want to use digitization to be able to issue credits quicker, sooner, and get that to the market sooner. So I will then turn the conversation over to my far left. Mustafa, I'm going to start with you. You're very active in developing a lot of digital products. Could you please explain how DMRV can benefit your portfolio or the projects that you're working with?
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Nadine, and thanks for the invitation to be here. So Climate Connect Digital, just a little bit of context there. So we are carbon advisory, carbon consultancy, but as the name indicates, we are also into digital space. So we are trying to connect the climate and carbon world with the digital world. That's the kind of challenge that we have for ourselves that we have set. In terms of the benefits of, why are we doing this and what we try to achieve, as Nadine was just mentioning, it's about the quality and the transparency, and that's always a question of what's the kind of quality that we're bringing in. So if you can, through digitization or the digital world, what it can do is it can bring independent data sources to cross-check the claims that are being made. So that's one straightforward way of how the quality and the transparency will increase, because you have more data sets available with you, which can then be processed by machines, thereby saving time as well. So these are the two direct benefits that can be seen. A third benefit, which is like more indirect, would be in the valuations. So a lot of the project developers may be concerned of, how does DMRV might affect them negatively, but it can also affect them positively in terms of valuations. As Nadine was mentioning, if you have faster issuance of credits, you're saving your time, which is directly linked to the cost of the project. So if you can get issuances faster, your registrations become faster, it also is leading to your bottom line and hopefully the top line as well, depending on the market scenarios. So these are some of the things, but maybe at a later stage, I can go a bit more detail into how actually some of our products and tools are helping our partners to achieve these things.
Hello? Yep, thanks Mustafa for that. Indeed, creating efficiencies, faster, better valuation, this is everything that we are going for. So Daniel, from more of a downstream perspective, can you please explain, how would a DMRV system, let's say, benefit sort of you, your work, and your clients from a downstream perspective?
Thanks, Nadine. So I guess a bit of context, Climate Impact X is a global marketplace and exchange for carbon credits. So we work with suppliers, project developers who seek to list credits on the platforms, but also buyers who are looking to buy some of these credits. And the buyers, they will come from different backgrounds. Some of them are very large, sophisticated entities, trading houses who trade and make money from them. But also there will be end users, corporates, and this will range from global MNCs to small, medium enterprises as well. So there's a little bit of context. From a downstream perspective, definitely anything that helps improves the speed of issuance, the efficiency of the process, and also integrity around the data is very helpful because, from one angle, for example, you see a lot of issuance delays across projects now, and there's a function, as I understand it at least, capacity bottlenecks around either the VVB processes or, even the standards, feeling overwhelmed from a lot of applications for some of these issuances. So something that helps improve that process is very helpful. And anything that helps improve the experience for the developers to get some of these projects across the line will also be useful because in our interaction with the developers, this is the longer it takes to get to issuance, the longer it takes to get cash flow through the door as well. So that's just a downstream lens, so to speak.
Daniel, so from a buyer's perspective, do you think a DMRV solution, is it the transparency that's more important, the integrity, or sort of the speed and efficiency?
I think the speed is helpful from a debottlenecking or supply constraints. From the integrity element, it enhances demand resilience. Because one of the features of this market, obviously, is that there's a lot of, rightfully so, conversations around how do we improve integrity across the market. And, some of these digital tools that help improve that confidence then builds that resilience. I mean, there are many things that move the needles around demand. There's not a conversation for that, but improving integrity definitely improves that resilience of demand.
Great, yes, and we want more resilience in demand, right? So, okay, great. So we're going to move on to the second part of this panel discussion. So if we could put up the blueprints, the digital verification blueprints that are on the PowerPoint. And then I will, okay. Great, yeah, so I can see it over there, then the light's in my face. Okay, so this is the two diagrams of the digital verification approaches that we're proposing in our white paper that was published in the summer. And I'll just briefly walk you through it because we're going to have a little bit more of a discussion around that. So you see the first one on the left, would it be your left? Yeah, on the left side, and that's the DVR platform. Here, actually, there's not really much changing in the roles of the different actors involved in carbon credit issuance and project development. So you have, project implementation, data capturing, quality control, quantification, and reporting, and this is happening really by the project participant, could be a project developer, owner, carbon management company, or third entity, and then you really have the verifier in the orange box, which is really trying to look at different parts of this, different stages of this process, and looking at the different parameters to verify. So you really don't have a change in role. You do have sort of a degree of digitization taking place. Some project developers may be further advanced, some less advanced. It really depends on the project type. And so here, of course, it's still about the verifier, figuring out how can we digitize our steps in this sort of scenario. And that's blueprint 1. Okay, and so if we move over to the other one, that's Blueprint 2, and this is the IQ&V platform, and yes, we need to probably change the name. It's the integrated quantification and verification platform, and here we do see a change in role. And so you see project implementation and data capturing is still taking place at a project developer, project participant level, but you see actually the role sort of switching over to this third-party entity who's managing the platform, who's doing data audits, quantification, reporting, and verification in one. So you really see a little bit of a shift happening there. And this is sort of where you're talking about different governance and different sort of changes in roles. So these are kind of the two different platforms. I hope the sort of difference is clear for the panelists, and then we can move on to the other questions about that. So I'm going to move on to you, Anantha. So in the cook stove of your portfolio, which is a lot of cook stove projects, biomass, safe water supply, electric pressure cookers. So do you see sort of a blueprint 1 model, or do you see a blueprint 2 model being more beneficial? And if you are using one of those, could you maybe just explain briefly how that's working?
Yeah, thanks, Nadine, and SustainCERT for the opportunity here. So firstly, before I answer that, maybe I can list down a few of the benefits as well to the audience that were discussed. One of the main benefits that we see from the process is the reduced need of documentation. If you are completely digitized, all the to and fro on the monitoring report, verification report, the need of documentation gets reduced. So that's something that I want to add there as well. And potentially also unlocking different technologies like blockchain NFTs that are available using these DMRP platform. So ease of monitoring is already addressed, and more than scale, like high integrity of credits is really important as well. So coming back to your question on distributed technology. So we at UpEnergy primarily focused on clean cooking and safe water. But we are also on lookout of other interesting project types that can create high integrity credits and impact around the world. On the blueprint 1 and 2, when it comes to distributed technologies, it's easily we can look at blueprint 1 as like a first stage of intervention, but over the long term, I think we would want to achieve blueprint 2 as well, but that requires a lot of modeling. We would want to prove the different sensors that is possible in, for example, like if we took cook stoves, for example. So we can probably use sums for usage monitoring, but how we can utilize the temperatures in the stoves to kind of model the fuel usage and the efficiency of the stove. So those are something that we don't have sufficient literature yet. So more modeling requirement is needed for distributed technologies to adopt to blueprint 2. But it's probably a need as well as we look at to achieve scale, how quickly we can move in the market. But accuracy is also important. So that's why right modeling need is important for the accuracy. On what we are currently doing, so we have piloted a couple of initiatives around the MRV. One is we have started procurement of sumps to start off with, how we can utilize that in our existing portfolio. And for EPCs, we also work on electric cooking. So we look to use IoT device-enabled electricity consumption monitoring. So that the digital methodology that was released by Gold Standard kind of accommodates those digitization aspects in it. So we are looking to effectively use that. But by saying that, we also want to compare both the TPDD tech, someone who is aware of the cook stoves, versus the digital MRV, how accuracy, conservativeness is considered. Because one of the best practice for a cook stove space is the physical inspection. How can we do a digital monitoring without having like one of the key best practices is like physical inspection of the kitchen? So those are the questions that that has to be answered, which is the key to drive the digitization here.
Thanks, Anantha. Yeah, so I'm hearing that we need to strike a balance between modeling, accuracy, site visits to check sort of physically, what's happening on the ground. So you're saying that probably wouldn't be at this stage yet possible to do like a full digitized approach. It would be some sort of a hybrid. Okay, good. So how are you feeling, Sandeep, with your voice? Should we move over to you? Yeah, okay, so would be good to understand the level of digitization that you're incorporating in your processes right now in your portfolio. If you could explain that a little bit, and if you could talk about, whether that's going to create scale in the market, yes or no?
Sure. I'm going to croak through a bit of this. I've just lost my voice. I just talk too much, is what I've been told. On the digital MRV space, I think it's super important because a lot of the standards today do not have enough human resources any which way to review all the project pipelines that we have. The only way actually out is to digitize, because there's never going to be enough people for the kind of pipeline that we expect to hit the carbon markets. So that is number one. I think it's a logistical thing as well, and it's a practical thing. Number two is the carbon markets as of now. I think there's a bit of, everybody thinks carbon markets is just cook stoves and NBS. There's a lot beyond that. And that's going to come in as well, waste management, anything metered, industrial efficiency. These are important parts of carbon markets as well. Because if you're going to decarbonize, you will have industry level decarbonization, and that is all metered. And it is really stupid for somebody now to go and check every meter physically like we used to do. So technology has gone much beyond 2012, is where we're comparing, a lot of the experiences from. So I believe that 80 to 90% of the carbon markets is not going to be NBS and cook stoves, which is primary level data. Now, primary level data is spurious as well. We've been piloting this for a very, very long time. So if you can talk about all the blockchains, but if the first information point is wrong, the entire chain goes for a toss. These are things that us project developers have to figure out on our end as well. So there's a bit of readiness on our end that we need as well, firstly. What are we doing? Obviously, land use and all of that. We have seen that the accuracy increases at least by 40% on digitization. It's as simple as that. Human error can be eliminated. But having said that, I think for scale, number one, any metered device should be digitalized. It's a no-brainer. And we all have to go down. That's electric cooking to anything industrial, anything else. How we make it more robust, we should do that if we should have done that as of yesterday. The other things that we have to do is, obviously, there will be a hybrid model. With forestry, cook stoves, water, etc. There has to be. And that will devolve over a period of time. But for us the carbon markets is a lot more than just this. And I think there's a massive play for digitization in all of these other areas of the carbon spectrum. Yeah.
Thanks, Sandeep. So I'm hearing we got to get out of 2012 and jump into 2022, the last month of that. I think also maybe standards would play a role there as well, looking at sort of, adapting methodologies, standards, and rules and requirements when it comes to using different technology. How do you feel about that?
I think there's a mind shift needed on the standards, to be honest. I think standards need to embrace this, and I don't think that's going to happen very easily. But that's, I think, crucial for this to happen. I think that dialogue needs to start really, really soon. And again, carbon markets are a lot more than just us in this room. So we will have to get down that road. And I think Gold Standard and Vera and all of these guys need to come to the table as of now and start this. This is going to be a process. It's not going to be easy. I don't think so. I mean, that's my personal opinion, actually. So.
Thanks. Yeah, and I mean, some of it has kickstarted already with the working groups, so so there is a start. So I'm going to move on to, let's say, Daniel first, and then Mustafa. So Daniel, you know, also again from the downstream perspective, you know, do you see sort of a blueprint 2, blueprint 1 having more impact? Is there something that buyers are maybe asking for? Do you think it's relevant if the blueprint 2 model, right? This is the integrated quantification and verification one. Do you feel like from a buyer's perspective and integrity perspective that this platform should be managed by a VVB actor or non-VVB actor? Do you think that would make a difference?
Thanks, Nadine, for the question. I think from a buyer lens, obviously, you know, if you were in Blueprint 2, it would be helpful to understand that the VVB plays a big role in that setup, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be the sole player. It could be partnering with a technology partner, for example. But the VVB must have a central role. Otherwise, what's the point of having VVBs? So from that lens, that would give assurance around the integrity, you know, because not everybody can be a VB, or if you're interested, then you know, go through the process to be one, right? So that's how I look at Blueprint 2. I mean, obviously, and I'm sure you'll ask this later, but one of the challenges will be how many IQ and V platforms will be there out there. And there's always the duplication effort. I mean, standards don't match. I mean, standards with a small s don't match. And then, you know, project developers, you know, struggle, so to speak. The larger project developers obviously might be able to do Blueprint 1, but, you know, if you are, you know, busy doing other kind of good work on the ground, you know, you may not be able to do Blueprint 1, so to speak.
Thanks. I think that's a really good point. You know, how many are there going to be out there, and then you know, striking the balance with, you know, can you really expect also some project developers to develop and manage these platforms, which is maybe outside of their sort of expertise as well. So it's a really good point. Mustafa, do you want to talk a little bit about the products that you've been developing, and then maybe if you could just link that to, you know, would you fit that into a Blueprint 1 or a Blueprint 2?
So yeah, thanks Nadine. The question is complex. So first is the products that you're making, and then how does it fit into this, right? So there are two parts, so I'll go one by one. The first part is like, I would like to offer the 3 products over here that we have. That, you know, the first one is called Offset Max. We're very happy to announce it that we just launched it yesterday. It's available now. We have gone through a 1-year process with market feedback and how to develop this. So this tool is about a carbon portfolio management tool. For example, if you like 150 projects across 10 countries, several registries following various methodologies, traditionally how it's being done is, you know, through Excel files or through commodity trading softwares which have been customized by some of these companies to manage them. So here is an alternative now. There's a fully built from scratch tool which is available for carbon commodities. That's available now. That's one of the digital products. It's a single platform where you can have a snapshot of all your projects at various stages. So this is a tool, you know, which in the process of time will help you digitize a lot of documents, because when the project design document is being developed, a lot of back and forth happens between the client and the people who are writing the document, right, the design document. So at that phase, if all of it, this documentation is digitized at the very beginning, it makes a lot of either option 1 or 2 easier, if the documents are already in a digital version in one single place. So that's the first product. The next 2 products are directly on the DMRV, the way we were discussing here. The first one is on the forecasting and scheduling that we do. Actually, currently, we are like doing forecasting and scheduling for 12 gigawatts of installed renewable energy. And I would like to add over here, you know, that digitization, as Sandeep was also mentioning, is much more straightforward in traditional sectors like renewable energy, where you have meters installed. We have live feedback coming from these projects to us in the SCADA readings and software aligned things, and we are getting almost instantaneous feedback. So as part of our company operations, we provide 15-minute schedules forecast for power production, and the next day power production forecast to these renewable energy owners. So, and this is what we are doing, and we get live feedback on our forecast. Is it correct? Is it wrong? So we get the real numbers and our forecast. So you have two data sets by which you can compare and verify as to what they're saying and what issuance they're claiming is correct or not. So that's on the renewable energy side. On the nature-based solutions, of course, there has been a lot of discussions, and it's quite well known that you can do biomass estimation using remote sensing. So I would park that aside. Of course, that can be done. I would like to move one step ahead of it. Forest fire detection, that's a major risk for nature-based solution projects as a permanent risk as well. So if there's a forest fire happening in a project area, you stand to lose some of the carbon credits, at least some. In severe cases, maybe all. So how does it, as a project developer, do you defend against this risk? How does the registry also keep a tab on the DMRV side? So we have now a tool which can give you, right now in the testing phase, it can give you 60-minute latency between the forest fire happening on the ground and you getting an alert from us. So that's one, and you get an alert every 30 minutes for your area of interest. So the frequency is 30 minutes, the latency is 60 minutes. So it's like actionable information for the project developer to extinguish the fire. Secondly, on the DMRV side, it acts as a long-term tool to see in the last reporting period how many fires took place as an independent source of verification. So it has implications on how much issuances can be done for these projects. So these are the three things that we're doing. Coming on to where does it fit into here? Right now, where the markets are and how we interact with our clients, this is more on the part one of the equation. The part two of the equation is a little bit more complex, and how we see it is more about the contracting part. It's one about the capacities as to who is the project developer, who are the consultants, do they have the capacities to do part one of it? If they don't, then of course, part two is where it's required that the verification and the validation bodies step in. Otherwise, if the consultants are adept enough, the project developers should be able to do it. So as a technology provider, then the question becomes, should the technology provider partner with the project developer, or should the technology provider partner with the VVBs, the validation bodies? So that's the question. So, I mean, it's a complex thing for me to answer, because from a technology perspective, it's about with whom are we partnering? That's the thing. But it can be done both ways. In the first option, it's like we have to again take permissions from our clients that this data can be shared. In the second option, it becomes easier because the registries are asking the validation bodies to do it. That permission is not required.
Thanks so much, Mustafa. Yeah, so I'm hearing there's, looking at the different roles and identifying those roles in this system is really important. Did you want to comment to that?
Yeah, I want to say there is also another option here. Why not the technology provider work with the standards? Because the standards are developing the methodology. They know the parameters that are to be monitored for a particular project type. So if the platform is actually facilitated by the standards, rather than having multiple options in the market, like project developer have n number of options, similar to VVB has n number of options. So if the platform is actually owned by the standard, that's and have an API feature where the access can be data collection can happen at the standard end itself. That could be a third option that can be explored as well. Yeah.
Thanks for throwing that out there, Anantha. The third option, so platforms are owned by the standards. I'm sure some people from maybe this is a good time, unless Daniel, Sandeep, you have something to add, but then I'm going to pass it on to the audience and see if anyone has a comment. So we're going to go to the audience here. Yeah, we're going to take one question from the audience and also see if the virtual participants have a question. If not, then we'll go back to the audience. So yeah, there was a question right here up front. If someone could pass the microphone.
Yeah, hi, interesting chat. So I'm Jonathan, I'm the CEO of Adatos. We're a digital MRV company based in Singapore. Maybe the panel could comment on the current Vera trial for digital MRV. Where you guys think that's going? I mean, I hear it's going to take 2 years, which seems incredible. Unfortunately, there's no Vera person to grill about it, but...
I think Andrew is here, but I don't know if he's in the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we were in the working group as well. I know that there was one launch with Pachama. It was sort of publicly launched. I don't know exactly how long that's going to last, but I do understand that there's going to be piloting happening, I guess, with different sort of platform providers. I'm not quite sure how that process is working. I would say we were part of this working group since the beginning, and it seems to, let's say, in a standard sort of perspective, there's strides being made. Of course, everything should go quicker, and we want to have results and we want to have clarity. But I think there is a good start to it. I don't know exactly how long, though, that it will last.
Okay, I would just agree with Sandeep's comment. I think this is a massive bottleneck for developers. And companies like Adatos, we just completed 1.5 million hectare land use, land cover, historical deforestation, and peat analysis in Africa for a developer. But it's very much kind of custom one-off business. I think the other gentleman commented it would be great if there was just an API and we could just press a button, right? I mean, that's going to be some way away. But obviously, if Vera can speed things up, it'll make it much easier for everybody around the table, I think.
Yes, please state your name and the company you work for.
Thank you. I'm Brahm Singh from Verdana. And the question I have is around the cost benefit. You see, the problem with DMRV, with most customers, is the cost of the sensors you put in. And so the question that comes up is, if I'm going to incur that cost, then do I, for the benefits that you speak about, that is the speed of issuance and the integrity, both very important, would I get a premium for that carbon credit in the market? So this question keeps cropping up. So I don't know if the panel has any comments on that.
No, I think I'll pass Sandeep, and maybe also Daniel, you can comment if there would be a premium from downstream. But yes, Sandeep first.
Yeah, I think there is a premium there. We've seen that for sure. And yes, it is more expensive. We still haven't figured it out in terms of the costing, because a lot of different projects have different requirements. A soil carbon project has IoT devices for different kind of IoT devices. A cook stove program has different. A nature-based program has different. And I agree with you, sir. If it's a RED Plus, it's a no-brainer. But I still have a big challenge on ARR projects and digital MRV systems. We don't seem to have a solution for it, to be honest with you. I have not seen something that works. But a direct answer to your question is, yes, you do get a premium. And in fact, the end buyers like that. Now, is that premium at this stage enough to cover for the cost? No. And that's where we are working towards. I think there's an educative process that is needed on the buy side as well, because you can't be asking for integrity and not willing to pay for it. So that's something that is ongoing, I would say. But I think we will reach there very soon. Daniel, sorry.
Just echoing, I guess, your comments, right? Like, I mean, I think the buyer universe will appreciate higher integrity for sure. The challenge would be the signaling, right? How do you distinguish yourself as higher integrity versus others? Because no project developer comes to market saying mine is less integrity than the other guy. So it will be that. But I mean, I guess to borrow an analogy, some of the AFOLU projects that have CCB certification for now do command some sort of premium. So to the extent that you have a label or signaling effect to say that, yeah, I went through digital MRV and therefore am more higher integrity, then yeah, you'll be able to explore and extract that premium over time.
Solution, the DMRV label on the registry, and the meta registry. No, I'm just joking. Great, thanks for all those inputs. I'm just wondering, is there a question from the virtual audience? No questions from virtual audience. Is there another question from our audience here? Any burning comments, questions from anyone? No? Okay, so then we'll move on to another part of our session, which is really talking about sort of the way forward, right? So we have some working groups, we have pilots taking place, we have MVPs, we have product iterations, How do we want to take this forward? And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to comment on this, and we'll start from the left-hand side with Mustafa. So what is the way forward? What are some of the biggest challenges you're faced with? And what are some of the solutions that you think we need to implement?
And one of the questions the audience asks is like on the timelines, and how is that you can reduce the timelines when the registries start accepting DMRV as one of the methodologies. So that's where that's a challenge. Some of the solutions might not be 100%, but there are some solutions, especially in the RE space, which are like quite over there, and at least those should be allowed by the registries. The challenge with the registries is that the pace at which the registries will move, and of course the practice will always be one step faster, because the registry's role is to be prudent about it and to maintain a conservative stand. So that's understood. What the registries can do is to take early cognizance of these developments. For example, in the biomass estimation space, things have been moving for a decade now, and there was enough signals out there that this would come to this stage that one time or the other, this would need to be taken into consideration. So even if at an experimental stage, you don't need to accept it once it's in trial, you can always reject it after the trial. So the trials can begin early on, learn with the technology companies whether it's working or not working. The technology companies would be very happy to collaborate with the registries and dispose of the things that are not working and keep continuing work on the 2 things that are working. Out of 10, 8 might be thrown out, 2 might be still kept by the registries to make the work progress faster. I'm just taking a hazard over here by giving them an example. For example, soil carbon using remote sensing. A lot of raised eyebrows will go up. It's valid. I understand the point. Completely agree with you. But this is something, it's the same thing was being said 10 years ago about biomass estimation using remote sensing. So I don't know whether in 5 years remote sensing for soil carbon would be accepted or not. Nobody knows, but this is the right time to start taking cognizance of these things which are appearing on the horizon, rather than wait for 10 years and then deciding whether you want to do it or not. Take it as an experimental thing, as a co-development thing, rather than waiting for 10 years and then taking a call whether it should be allowed or not.
Thanks, Mustafa. Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing here is just to learn from key lessons learned from sort of sectors outside of the carbon markets where they've already been testing and expanding and iterating on different technology solutions, and actually just accepting that as sort of a reference and integrity.
Exactly, and it's a cost for the technology companies who are working with the registries, but it's a cost which all the technology companies would be happy to bear, because it's something which is contributing to the whole ecosystem. And that's a thing which is worth doing,
Yeah, I guess conversations like this is a good way of forwarding the conversation, I guess, in a way. But I think what SustainCERT is trying to roll out, initiatives like that. But fundamentally, more case studies, more educating the buyers as to why this makes a difference, right? I mean, if you are able to get buyers to recognize that this improvements enhances integrity, brings speed to market, and as to the gentleman's question in the back, create a label, create some sort of recognition that, hey, this is better, then you are able to drive that premium, which is a virtuous cycle, so to speak.
Yeah, so as a way forward, I think we can start off with the technologies that are easily possible to integrate. Like, for example, I think the white paper itself says that we can start with renewable energy and afforestation as like a first step. But the other project types can also start including some part of digitization in their overall monitoring. There are like various advantages to it. And from a VVB perspective, if we look at embracing Blueprint 2, then they probably will have to increase their capacity around how to validate the data. It's not in the correct expertise of the VVBs. They are more focused on the environmental audits. So how they can do technology audits, like how to validate data. So those are the gaps at the VPP side. And from standard side, I probably agree with you. I think there has to be like a differentiator as well compared to like digital VERs versus normal VERs. So that might increase the gap in the price, like, improve the price point. So a lot of project developers are motivated to embrace digital monitoring quicker.
Thanks, Anantha. I think what I'm hearing as well, and I agree, if you look at the different roles of the actors in this, in carbon markets, and when it comes to verification of projects, you have a sort of persona, or let's say a sort of role to play. And so if you're moving onto a digital sort of space, you would probably need to have other expertise, in your organization, especially if it's a verifier doing traditional sort of way of verification. You may have to hire different sort of software engineers or data scientists to understand sort of, the data coming in. So I think that's also something to consider here. Yeah, thanks for that. Sandeep, can you talk about ways forward and challenges that you're faced with, or challenges you think DMRV is facing, and how we should sort of, get over those challenges?
Yeah, I think some two sides. One is I think anything metered should be digitized, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it as of now. So I think that's the first way forward. Anything metered out there, let's go for digitized. Forget about it, because that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why it's not happened yet. The second thing that I would look forward to is for the technology providers also to start working with project developers to actually have test cases. Technology providers, for whatever good reason, seem to think their technology is always the best and can do the job. We have piloted a lot of technologies which actually don't work. So the fact is, even technology providers need to up their game a little bit, I would assume. I mean, even in this conference, I met a lot of people saying, my technology works. They've done one pilot, 2 pilots. But frankly, and this is something a lot of us project developers have, and we've been exchanging notes as well over the last couple of days and probably the last couple of months, not everything works. So there has to be something on that end as well. And we, as larger project developers in the markets, we're happy to work with you guys. Provided, there's because anybody in this field would want to digitize. Why wouldn't we? So it's just that also technology providers, I mean, you mentioned soil carbon, right? Every soil carbon tech guy says, no, I do it, and it's the best way I do it. That's not the way to approach this. Saying, guys, we're doing something, let's do this together. Every guy on ARR, for example, is saying, I cannot measure my saplings if there is grass around it, unless I send a drone out there. Satellite imagery hasn't solved that problem for me because the resolution isn't good enough. That's something the tech community needs to accept as a challenge as well, instead of going out there and saying, you guys are old, you guys are archaic, we do it for a reason. If you had a technology, we would have bought it by now. So that's the idea that, there has to be a collaboration on 2 ends. Standards need to really embrace it. Tech providers need to really get to the real nuts and bolts of it. Everything works on a model, everything works on a pilot, but on scale, not always that's the case. So I think in a way, that's where the way forward, and number 3 is what my number 1 point is. Anything metered, go digital.
So anything metered, go digital. It's a tagline. Thank you for that, Sandeep. So just asking, is there any other questions from the audience or from the virtual panelists? Now is your last time. I think we have probably about 3 or 4 minutes until this session ends. So if you have any questions, please let me know. No? Yes. Okay, I think one behind here and also in front.
Hi, I'm Ivan from 3 Points. So I thank IETA for organizing and thanks the panel. So for someone very new to carbon, right, I'm grateful for this, but don't know where is the right space to speak this, but I'm all for digital, but there's always geopolitics, right? Once digital, your data will be there, and then, got a China in US, Vera being US, soil carbon. So is that a stumbling block, or how does it going to move forward? And, is it better to keep everything on paper? Yeah.
Yeah, think it's with data privacy. It was a little bit hard to understand.
It's more on data privacy.
Data
because-
privacy.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, sure, yeah, I'll do that, an attempt at least, yeah. So, I mean, so when we work, when we work on the technologies, for example, on the scheduling and forecasting, we work with clients, so they are power producers, and we work with them. And we work with them, we of course sign off on papers saying that this data won't be disclosed. And if a digital MRV needs to be done, we need another round of signatures saying that this data can be shared for XYZ reason for your projects for a faster, MRV process, for example. So that's how it happens. And I think the project developers will appreciate the point that, it's saving them time and therefore, saving them some of the capital cost also in turn, by doing a faster DMRV process. That's on the technology part. Just another comment, which came during the discussions, which as a thought, but I would like to share it over here. The most critical thing, will always be going on a carbon project, is always going to be the on-ground implementation. DMRV can solve problems, but it cannot, it never claims to solve all the problems, On-ground implementation is the most difficult thing, and we appreciate it completely as a person who has worked on the ground also for like 5-6 years at least, directly implementing projects. I appreciate that problem 100%. It's completely agreed that implementing on ground is the most difficult job, and I fully appreciate that. But technology has a role. Completely agree to the point that collaboration is required. Collaboration is required not only between the project developers, technology providers, these standards and verification bodies, but also among the technology developers themselves. There's so much competition out there that everybody's reinventing the wheel. It's better that you collaborate and you start creating something better than a wheel, right? I mean, if somebody has a technology piece, the other company should try to collaborate and take it forward to a much larger scale. So that thing is collaboration, I completely agree, even among technology companies.
Yeah, I think there was one more question in the first row, and did you still have the question? Yeah. The microphone.
Thanks very much. Thank you. What would you say is the greatest misconception amongst policymakers and amongst carbon markets leaders specifically?
I missed your first part.
What would you say is the greatest misconception in the space that two groups of people have? One, policymakers. Two, general carbon markets experts, your peers.
Yeah, so the biggest misconceptions for policymakers and other carbon market players. Misconception around DMRV, I think. Yeah. I think, Anantha, you feel comfortable? Yeah.
So, I mean, I wouldn't call it misconception, but everything has to be like around the price value, like increased price of carbon around that. So maybe like, the cost of digitization might be something that every project developer thinks that it might be too high. It is high for sure, but that can be bridged with the price of the credits that it can be sold to. So that's probably one misconception. Sorry, I'm deviating, but the other challenge that I missed was also because we operate in very rural regions in Africa, for example. So many places that doesn't have internet access. So those regions, it might be tough to kind of, embrace fully digitized model. So there has to be like a hybrid option there. But on policy misconception, I'll leave to the rest of the panel.
I think that's another session by itself, because there are lots of misconceptions at the policy level. I don't think this is a panel we can start discussing that. There are almost 50, 60 different issues that are misconceptions, both at the policy level as well as the carbon space level. One is just the understanding of what a carbon credit is. So it's as basic as that. So I think I would start with that, to be honest. A lot of policymakers have no idea what a carbon credit is. That's true.
Great, so I hope that answered your question.
What would you say is the greatest? I can rephrase the question. What would you say is the greatest learning for the audience here at IETA?
We'll end with that. I'll ask each of the panelists to sort of the take-home message for the audience here. What's one take-home message? Start with you, Sandeep, and then we'll go on to the rest.
The session DMRV, I think we're going to stick to that. As IETA has, probably there's a closing plenary where people will talk about exactly how this conference helped people. I think the takeaway from here is, for me, is if there are people in the room who have anything to do with forwarding this agenda of DMRV, is to understand that this is the future. We need to embrace it. We need to do it. We need to do it quickly, but we also need to do it right at the MRV level. Now, in projects, there are two kinds of things that happen. There is a project implementation phase, and then there is an MRV phase. What we are talking about is the MRV phase. And let's be very clear that that's the future. This is where it's going to go. And the only takeaway that I would hope that goes out of this room is that, again, anything metered needs to get digital. The rest needs to be figured out, but we do not have much time. So let's give ourselves the next 3 years and sort this out once and for all. And standard API, I'm actually a big believer in that. I don't know how technology companies look at it. Standards have to have their own API systems, period, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think we have time. The one take-home message for the audience.
For the audience, I think it depends on the stakeholder, like relevant, if there are validation technology providers, project developers, or investors. I think digitization is the way to scale this market. So I think we all have to work together and put on our different hats to kind of agree and try to achieve that. Is the message I would say. Yeah.
I guess for me, the takeaway is that we do need to work together. And I like Sandeep's message around how different technology providers, will advocate that their technology is the best, but actually, they also need to work with the developers to just make it a success. So yeah, that's my takeaway.
Thanks for that question. Great question over there. As a long-term observer of the climate and carbon market, so as to say, the key takeaway is that things move slowly, especially if it's progress. And if something bad happens, that makes headlines. But if something good is happening, it's always so slow that you don't even realize it. But over the year, it certainly builds up, and it's all contributing. Everything is linked. We might think that this two-day event might not contribute much, but it does. In its own way, everything does contribute. Everything is linked together, and that's the whole idea of why we come here together, to build partnerships, to work and develop things jointly. It's a slow work, but yes, it's a work towards progress.
Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of this panel. I wish you all a safe trip home. Thank you for attending, and thank you for my esteemed panelists here and all your wise take-home messages. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.